Cambridge now, rowing up to the stake boats.
After all the problems we've had this year, it seems that we're moving to some dramatic Wagnerian...
My word!
And there is the Wagnerian climax, an enormous clap of thunder.
A huge flash of lightning, and then that enormous clap of thunder, which frightened the life out of me. 133rd University Boat Race. And they are off. And the great cheer goes up from the banks of the Thames. And there's a wide divergence of crews here. Extraordinary, Chris.
Yes, Oxford are already going for cover. They're going to look at, see if they can get the flatter water underneath the Middlesex shore. And there they hope that they may get the advantage of the Middlesex bend by rowing cleanly through calm water. They will lose the tide, but they'll actually have the advantage of smooth water.
And confirmation that the umpire's launch, in fact, did break down, and Moynihan transferred to the Oxford launch. And Oxford have gone right up under the Fulham Wall.
And Cambridge are actually following them over. They're not so far. There must be a good 50 yards separating the two crews at the moment. This is a tremendous gamble by the Oxford crew to get round this bend. They must try and get at least a length in front of Cambridge by the time they get to the end of the first mile.
And as they come past our commentary box, Oxford are up by only a foot or two. And in fact, it looks as though Cambridge may be pulling level with them.
I think so. They both went off at a similar rate of striking, taking the same sort of numbers of strokes. Looking now at Oxford. Giant Gavin Stewart stroking that boat along.
And even under the shelter of the Fulham Wall, the conditions quite rough. And Oxford have pulled over right beside them now. And Oxford seem to be a fraction up.
Oxford seem to have about a third of a length. It will be Cambridge who will control the water after that bend, so Oxford have got to try and get some more. Otherwise Cambridge will prevent Oxford coming back into the tide. Oxford will therefore have to fight in the slack water.
And this first Middlesex bend is estimated to give it 2/3 of a length advantage.
That's about right. It's very, very approximate, these distances, but it's thought to be like that, depending on the actual steering. Oxford have nearly 3/4 of a length.
And from our overhead shot, we see the margin now almost a length. That's a good start by Oxford.
Good start. The gamble seems to have paid off so far. But I think they're moving now into smoother water, and they'll want to ease back into the middle of the river.
Because that's where the fastest current is.
The fastest current is to be found nearer the middle of the river. In fact, you take the ideal line, you flow slightly round the outside of the middle of a bend. At this stage, they're still well over to Middlesex.
They pass Craven Cottage, the home of Fulham Football Club. I wonder how many more boat races we should be saying that. Fulham playing Port Vale, kick-off 3 o'clock this afternoon. Cambridge crew. And you can see for yourself just how turbulent that water is. And oarsmanship, good oarsmanship, is going to be at a premium in these sort of conditions.
Cambridge are using walls which aren't made of wood. It's the first time this has ever been done in the boat race. We'll see here whether they're going to be an advantage or not.
It's important to remember that Cambridge have the more experienced oarsmen in the boat, but they are far the lighter crew.
They're lighter and also younger, but there's some very wise heads on those young bodies, and they will be quite happy at the moment as long as they don't drop back any further. It's very important they keep moving over the top of those waves.
Now they could at this point now be keeping Oxford out of the fast water, couldn't they?
At this stage they've certainly got the better of the tide, but Oxford are rowing cleanly. They seem to be both in control. They're matching each other for rate. They're both striking about 33, which is the stride rate we've seen both crews use in practice.
Our first timing point will be the mile post. That'll be coming up quite shortly. I don't think there's much point in talking about records in these conditions, but just for interest's sake, the record to the mile post is 3 minutes and 31 seconds, so you'll be able to get a comparison from that.
And the crews are very much overlapping and also interlocking. Oxford trying to keep well away.
Well, you can see already, over 4.5 minutes. And here's an interesting development. The two crews in line abreast.
Now, Oxford are making a challenge to try and get back into the tide, and it's important that Cambridge don't let them move over in front of them, otherwise they'll get the cover of the Surrey Bend. Now you can see the Cambridge Cox responding, moving back inside them to try and hold his own water.
They just about had the clearance there to do that, didn't they, Oxford? Only just.
There was a moment there where Oxford had about a quarter of a length. You shouldn't, as a Cox, move over until you have more than that, but clearly the Oxford Cox is going to want to try and take all the advantages that he can. And there he's having a go again. He's edging over in front of Cambridge.
Andy Lobbenberg, the Oxford Cox. And the milepost was reached in 4 minutes and 19 seconds. The distance between the two crews was 1 length.
Oh dear. Got a big close up on the flag on TV, apparently.
So a very interesting tactical race going on here between these two crews, with Oxford now, with some clearance between themselves and Cambridge, are now able to move over and take Cambridge's water.
Oxford spurted as they came past the milepost and raised the number of strokes they were taking a minute by some 2 strokes a minute. They went up to over 34.5, and they've broken clear of Cambridge. Cambridge are now rowing behind them, and really Cambridge need to get back on terms at this point so that they can put pressure on Oxford through Hammersmith Bridge. And there's Oxford fighting to keep in front, fighting to keep that advantage over Cambridge as they come onto the Surrey Bend.
Now, once they've shot Hammersmith Bridge, I suspect the conditions are going to be rather worse than they are at this moment, because then the wind has dropped considerably, but what wind there is will then be head-on against the tide and against them.
And we're looking down there at a lead of about 1.5 lengths, and Cambridge must make an effort here to get on terms. They've got to take advantage of the Surrey Bend. At the moment, they're not in a position to do so.
This is an amazing start, in fact, by Oxford, isn't it?
Yes, so they've gambled, and it's come off magnificently. They've got exactly what they want, which is control of the Surrey Bend.
And you can see for yourself Hammersmith Bridge, which celebrates its 100th anniversary this year. There'll be all sorts of celebrations in June to mark that occasion. The record at Hammersmith Bridge is 6 minutes and 24, and you can see for yourself they've already been occupied for more than 7 minutes, and they're not quite there yet.
Oxford rowing cleanly, seem to be well in control at this point.
And Cambridge now really do have a big problem on their hands, because they've lost the advantage of the Surrey Bend, because Oxford have taken their water. They reach Hammersmith Bridge, built in 1887, in the 50th year of Victoria's reign.
Oxford have a lead of approximately 1.75 lengths.
It's a big lead at this stage of the race, Chris.
It's definitely a big lead, and Cambridge are looking for shelter. You see them edging over already to try and get under that Surrey Bend, and they're closing on Oxford. That daylight, the clear water between the crews is reduced. There's perhaps a length between the crews now. And what we must be wondering is how much did it take out of the Oxford crew to get to Hammersmith? The Cambridge crew have been well prepared to row the whole way through this race, and we've got to see whether they've got the strength and experience to row round this Surrey Bend. 2 of the boys have been quite seriously ill. Garman at 7 and Peel at 6 both had chicken pox, and it kept them out of the boat for more than a fortnight. It's not ideal preparation for an endurance race like this. This has all the makings of being a major challenge.
And we have the official time at Hammersmith Bridge. Oxford got there in 7 minutes and 40 seconds. They were leading by 7 seconds. A very slow race. And the light dapples the water as we look down on these two crews, with Oxford now leading by, well, 1.75 lengths, certainly.
Yes, and they responded to Cambridge's attack, and they managed to pull out a bit more clear daylight. But there's some more rough water to come.
Well, if Dan Topolsky has got this crew into this sort of condition after all the trouble they've had, it really is a remarkable achievement.
It'll be quite remarkable. He's talked about retirement after this year. What a way to retire that would be.
Well, it's not over yet, and the dark blues are ahead, but it looks to me as though Cambridge may be making a spurt again here.
Cambridge is still trying to hold on to that inside of the bend. They're slightly inside Oxford, but they are, in effect, one in front of the other. And that isn't going to give Cambridge any of the advantage that they need.
We're in Chiswick Reach now. When they reach Chiswick 8, that's approximately halfway. There's the great flotilla that follows this race every year, throwing up swirling waves as they go by.
Certainly gives some indication of the speed that these crews are travelling at. Looking at 15, 17 miles an hour.
And the distance between the two crews now seems to be in the nature of 2 lengths, perhaps even a little more.
And this has been a major upset. I think very few of the pundits would have expected this at this stage. Oxford rowing well and in control.
And the Oxford Cox looks back over his shoulder just to see how much lead he's got. And it's a useful lead at this stage of the race, roughly halfway.
So apart from the appalling conditions into which these crews are fighting their way, the physical effort these boys make is quite enormous. Each stroke they pull, they're trying to do the equivalent of lifting a good sack of potatoes from their feet to your neck. 50 pounds every time they pull.
And Oxford seem to be pulling out rather more of a lead now. 9 pounds a man heavier, remember. That may be telling. But it's the quality of the oarsmanship that's got them through that early part of the race that seems to me so astounding.
I think they obviously made the right tactical decision off the start, and they got through off the mile, and here they are, comfortably in front. It's so much easier to row with a 2-length advantage. There's a lot of pressure on those young heads of Cambridge. It's probably the best rowing we've ever seen from Oxford while they've been up here. They've been getting better all the time.
Well, of course, they can't see the end of the race, but we can from our overhead shot. And you can see for yourself Barnes Bridge there in the distance. That's where the Surrey Bend, where the Middlesex Bend takes over again after the long Surrey Bend. And the Surrey Bend now for these crews running out. And so Cambridge have a problem now. Oxford presumably now will make for the other side and keep themselves in advantage.
And Oxford seem to have about 3 lengths now, which really does create a very serious problem for Cambridge. To cover that sort of distance will require a phenomenal spurt.
A nice position to be in. You can just pace yourself now, can't you, compared with the other crew that you can see.
Indeed, 2 lengths of clear water is a very comfortable amount. And Gavin Stewart, the Oxford stroke, looks like repeating the remarkable achievement of last year.
And we have the official time at Chiswick Steps, which is the 3rd timing point, and Oxford reached the Chiswick Steps in 12 minutes and 15 seconds, which is precisely 2 minutes slower than the record time to there. Cambridge got there in 12:25, so there was 10 seconds between the two crews at Chiswick Steps.
And this is probably the reverse of what most people expected, so this is a most remarkable upset.
It's a good comeback after having been defeated last year after those 10 wonderful years for Oxford.
Indeed, and it's against what a background, too, of all the problems that Oxford have had in their run-up to this race. One wonders what sort of crew they might have had. It's always a question of what might have been, but this, too, is a good Oxford crew.
And a very interesting first boat race for the new sponsors, Beefeaters Gin, who are putting £330,000 into this race over the next 3 years, and I don't think they'll be too disappointed with what they're getting today. It's been very dramatic.
Indeed.
Now we look back from Lonsdale Road, one of our camera points, as this great armada comes towards us, led by these two fine crews, and Oxford particularly here, really putting on a show for us in this 133rd boat race. What's that huge bottle in the background there? Am I seeing things? No, I don't think I am. Oxford moving very steadily, their eyes on the following crew, making their way home to what now seems inevitable victory. Well, we can give the boys a plug as we watch them at bar. Hugh Pelham. At 2, the American Peter Gish. At 3, Tony Ward. 4, Paul Gleeson, who was the stroke at one time. At 5, Richard Howell. That's Gleeson there, 5, Richard Howell. And then at 6, the president, who must be well pleased with the way things are going, 31-year-old Donald MacDonald. At 7, Tom Cadoux-Hudson, former London University oarsman. And the giant stroke, 6 feet 8, Gavin Stewart, 16.5 stone.
I think Richard Howell must be very pleased, though we have a man who was overlooked by Cambridge and finds himself at Oxford in a winning blue boat.
Amazing to think that it's only a week since this crew was virtually ripped apart and put into different seats. And the whole thing's shaken up, and now they're rowing to victory in the boat race.
Indeed, on the form, they'd had a very rough first week on the Tideway, losing to a number of good Tideway crews, Imperial College, then Tideway Scullers, whereas Cambridge took on the best. They took on the national squad, and then the Italian composition, which is coming up ahead this afternoon, and did very well against both. Very few would have expected this.
And now the crews must head for the central span of Barnesbridge. 13:57 is the record time to Barnesbridge. You can see for yourself from our clock just how much slower this time is today.
Interestingly enough, Oxford are continuing to rate higher than Cambridge throughout this race. They've been generally 1 stroke a minute higher, which one wouldn't expect to see in a crew with such a commanding lead as this has got.
3/4 of a mile to go. Oxford looking so comfortable. It all looks so easy now. But those opening moments of this race must have been very difficult indeed for both these crews. And Cambridge, all hope now, I think, gone. Nothing but defeat, staring them in the face, but they still have to pull to the finish.
This is going to be a bit of lesson for the young men. So hard to come with high expectations, find them shattered in such a way.
The official time at Barnesbridge, Oxford 16 minutes and 27 seconds. Cambridge 16 minutes and 39 seconds, so they've dropped another 2 seconds behind between Chiswick Steps and Barnesbridge.
The boat race is very much a race for the opportunist, and we've seen that classically today, how Oxford saw an opportunity and took it. The conventional racing crews, where you have still water and lanes where you can't move from side to side, it's rather more clear-cut. But here, it's for quick thinking, coordination between cox and crew, and Oxford have found that.
So Oxford now heading for their 11th win in 12 years. Cambridge, I think, had been the favourites all the way through the build-up to the race, hadn't they, Chris?
Well, they certainly have since the dropout with the Americans. Before that time, I think most people fancied the Oxford chances with so much international experience which the Americans offered. But they've shown that they can do it regardless. You know, Cambridge have had to rely on essentially a domestically produced crew all the way through, but they've got some very talented youngsters, though today has not been their day.
It's the old story, isn't it, of the heavier crew taking over. £9 a man, it's obviously told.
Yes, it has, but I think it had less to do with weight here than just the way they were rowing. I think the quality of Oxford rowing has been good.
And now we look back towards the two crews as they come towards the finish at Mortlake Brewery. Some three lengths perhaps between them.
Yes, and they're making...
which is not a huge margin, you were saying earlier.
No, it's not. Again, we're talking about a sort of 1% margin, but they're rowing well over water that looks somewhat flatter than when we saw the Isis Goldie race half an hour ago. It's extremely difficult to control one of these boats. They're some 50 feet long, only about a foot to 2 feet wide, and you're using those 12.5-foot oars to balance them. It requires complete precision and great lightness of touch to do just that.
And so, We're looking at one of the most remarkable stories that the boat race has thrown up in recent years. Here's a crew that had mutiny on their hands only a couple of months ago. They were apparently seen to have no chance at that point as they had to reorganise, put new men into the boat. And yet here today, Oxford are coming home to victory in the 133rd University boat race. And they're winning by some 3 lengths as the flag goes down. And Oxford have won. They've overcome all those extraordinary difficulties. And how happy they are. And can you blame them? And Cambridge pulling rather disconsolately, as you would expect. The more experienced crew, much the lighter crew. But they've been, I'm afraid, quite soundly trounced today by Oxford.
Absolutely. It was a remarkable victory by Oxford. I imagine in the beginning of the race they even must have had doubts about themselves. And it's not good to go into a race having doubts. Here they have shown what they're capable of. A great achievement by Oxford. And most of these Oxford oarsmen will be available again next year, so Oxford must be very happy today.
Not good news for Cambridge, Chris.
I'm afraid not good news for Cambridge, speaking as a Cambridge man.